Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to The Book, exclusively here on adfreeshows.com. And of course, we couldn't do it without a member of Wrestling Royalty. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the program here, Mr. David Crockett. David, how are you, man?
Conrad, I am doing fantastic. I couldn't do any better, really. It's a great day. I'm on this side of the grass, and I'm here with you.
I love that, man. On this side of the grass is a great line. I'm going to steal that. You're going to hear it in other podcasts. But what you're going to hear today is us talking about day by day, week by week, show by show, gate by gate, exactly what happened to Jim Crockett Promotions in April of 1985. It's hard to believe this was so many years ago. Like 1985 to me doesn't seem like that long ago, but here we are all these years later talking about it.
Yes. It just goes, just like I sent you the email or the text about, it's been two years since Jimmy passed away.
It's crazy.
Time flies. It really does. I mean, it's just nuts. This really is, matter of fact, the next day was the anniversary of my mother.
Right.
And then Myra, Jimmy's wife's father, died 9 days later. And it's just shit happens. Come on. But time keeps on going on. And if we don't take advantage of it, we can't get it back. So, that's why we got to have a good time.
Well said, Mr. Crockett. Well said. Well, let's start at the very beginning of April. It was Monday, April 1st, but no April fooling. You guys ran two shows that day, Fayetteville, North Carolina and Greenville, South Carolina, two staples for the Crockett Promotions.
Yes.
You had $6,000 in Fayetteville, $7,100 in Greenville. Greenville would see a lights out Texas death match between Jimmy Valiant and the Barbarian. And for the U.S. title, we had Ivan Koloff and Magnum TA. Meanwhile, in Fayetteville, we had a TV 20-minute time limit. We had Dusty Rhodes taking on Tully Blanchard. We also had the Raging Bull and Arn Anderson. What a great way to start your show, man. In the Carolinas to start your month of April, just knee deep in Fayetteville and Greenville. Like really, listen, we've talked about Virginia and we've talked about all the other states that you guys are in. Cause you guys, in 85, you're going to start to really spread out and stretch your wings, so to speak. But at the heart of it, would you agree that it was North Carolina and South Carolina?
Oh, yes. Yes. The other was we would spread out to try to help others fend off Vince, and in some cases that was the wrong thing for us to do.
Right.
We needed to stake out, as Ric Flair says, everything east of the Mississippi, and we take Virginia as the battleground, let's say that, and we'll take the South and, we'd be happy. But, we didn't do that because there were other promoters that, wanted our help. And so we thought it was a good thing. You talk about Fayetteville, Fayetteville, that is Fort Bragg. Fayetteville wouldn't exist without Fort Bragg. First of the month, military paycheck.
There you go.
So that was good time. Yes.
Was there, listen, I think everybody listening to this knows that from the mind of a promoter, the weekends are best. Friday night, Saturday night, maybe Sunday afternoon. Yes. But through the week, like when we're talking Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, was there a day that was better than others? Like if you look at the Memphis territory, they historically ran their big show at the Mid-South Coliseum on Monday night. Was there a day for Crockett Promotions that really stood out amongst all the others? As far as not necessarily a day of the month, not the date, but a Monday, a Tuesday, a Wednesday, a Thursday. Was there like hey, this is JCP, besides the whole 605 Saturday night stuff?
Sure. I would say it depended on the area that we were in. In that Greenville, South Carolina, traditionally always a Monday night town. always did well, and it was a low cost building. Charlotte, we ended up having to. It fit better on a Sunday. Greensboro, Thursdays. Greensboro was a good Thursday night, but to get more people, we'd move it to the weekend. Richmond, Virginia, that was Friday night. Traditionally, Friday night was good up there. Now, too, in the South, you're having to deal with high school football in the fall. Not so much basketball, because there are a smaller group of people on a basketball team than a football team. So, after football season in the South, we were, running strong. I guess that helps some. The Wednesday, that's church night.
That's exactly right. Bible Belt in the South is a real thing.
Oh,
and I realize
yes.
a lot of our listeners may not realize that, but in the South, it's a mostly religious area. So you're talking about, Christianity, of course, but more often than not in the South, it's things like Baptist and Presbyterian and, whatever it might be. But the reality is you've got a Sunday service, Sunday morning, you've got a Sunday night service, but you've also got a Wednesday night service.
Yes.
So a lot of people who went to Sunday morning didn't go to Sunday night, but they would go to Wednesday night. So that's, it's hard to compete with the Lord. You're going to lose a lot of times there.
And also Wednesday, they had dinner.
That's exactly right. It served as part of the service. Everybody gets together, has some dinner, fellowships, then they go to their service. And to interrupt that sort of fellowship time and friend time and family time, and also, their religion, that's hard to compete with. So I could see how, especially in like Memphis, for instance, Monday made sense as opposed to a Wednesday. And if I'm honest, it shows you how things have changed. Were you surprised when you saw that of all the days that AEW could pick, they picked Wednesday? And maybe the network picked it for them, but still that does show you how things have changed, at least nationally. Wednesday is the AEW A show.
Well, if you look at television now, okay, here, because we're getting into a different ball game here.
There you
go. What is their competition on Wednesday?
Well, it's not basketball.
From all the network, all the primetime shows that they have on Wednesday, it's, they're not that many that buck them. I mean, part of the season, because they go through a cycle. The first part of the, from what? They have a rating in May that bring us new shows. In summer, they have a summer, then fall. Then they get towards May again, and the reruns start out back and forth. So it's hard to pick. Believe it or not, now I'd pick Friday nights because programming wise on national television, I think it's sort of boring. To me, the primetime network shows, they're all goody two shoes.
Well, to your point, WWE SmackDown is on Friday. And of course, we know as soon as that ends, you can flip it over to TNT and watch AEW Rampage. I think Impact's on Thursday. Of course, we know the A show for AEW is Wednesday, Monday Night Raw on Monday, NXT on Tuesday. Speaking of Tuesdays, on April 2nd, here in 1985, you guys are in Spartanburg, South Carolina, doing a television taping. You got $6,700 here at the gate. Show A and Show B, and we see in blue ink here, Show A is 635, Show B is 4335. After we've been doing this for a few months, Mr. Rocket, I still have no idea what these numbers mean.
Well, I asked JJ Dillon because he did a lot, and he hasn't gotten back to me. But the thing is, Spartanburg, that is such a small building. I mean, you maybe max have 500 people.
Right.
Yeah. And they're packed in, and, I could spit and hit the ring from our announce positions. And hot. Matter of fact, lighting wise, we had to use what they call lining trees. You just they're pistons and they go up, and you have light trees at each corner, and you can't even rig in there. So and the noise, the crowd, they just were. I loved it. It's great for television. It was truly great for television.
Let's talk about Wednesday, April 3rd. You're in Raleigh, North Carolina, $6,000 here. And on top, it's Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard. It's a Texas deathmatch rules for the TV title. Your co-main event, I guess you'd call it, Ivan Koloff against Magnum TA. We've also got a no DQ match with Raging Bull Manny Fernandez against Arn Anderson. This is a fun era. And you see in the notes at the very bottom, if you're looking at Mr. Dillon's handwriting, it says Hebner. This is years before we had the evil twin referee angle in the WWE. What are your memories of Earl Hebner as a referee?
He was very good. Really. He really was. He was, we had Sonny Fargo, loved Sonny Fargo, but still, Sonny had a lot of age on him. And, he was stuck in his ways, but God bless Sonny Fargo. And he was a wrestler, former wrestler. So you find things for them to do. And this was one of them.
I love that. I appreciate you respecting wrestling history that way. And of course, history was made on April 4th. It's a Thursday, but you're still running 2 shows. Now think about this, y'all. We had A and B shows here, even on a Thursday. Charleston, South Carolina would see the Boogie Woogie Man taking on the Barbarian. Right. We would also see a grudge match between Raging Bull and Arn Anderson. Meanwhile, over in Amelia, Virginia, we saw the U.S. title on the line for Magnum TA and Ivan Koloff. $2,400 in Charleston. Amelia, Virginia, $4,100. Now, Amelia, Virginia is not a town we've spent a lot of time talking about. Would we call this a quote unquote spot show?
Oh, yes. Yes. And it's like a spot on a map. It's not, it's not big at all. But there too, you've got Magnum, getting, he was one of the draws. When he came in for us, it just like, it was electricity. And when he walked in that ring, I loved every minute of it.
It's fascinating to me because you're very clear in pointing out that Amelia, Virginia was a quote unquote spot show. And as I throw it in Google right here, I see that even today, there's only 13,000 folks in that whole county in Amelia, Virginia. Mm-hmm. Charleston, South Carolina, obviously a much bigger market, but Charleston, South Carolina, therefore probably sees more attractions come through town. Amelia, Virginia might actually be starved for entertainment and things like this.
Right. And this was the boosters.
Oh,
club.
There you go.
High school. Yeah. Most spot shows, 95% of all spot shows, we had boosters from the school putting on the event. That way, they're not paying the rent, or we're not paying the rent. And they cover the floor. They put the chairs up and they handle all the concessions theirs. And, we take a percentage of the gate. So, and we promote it off our shows, but a lot of it has to do with them promoting it locally, and come out and have some fun, bring the family, and a lot of the people there probably don't go 50 miles from that city, that town, I just don't see it.
Well, we know everybody saw it on Friday, April 5th in Hampton, Virginia. We got $4,600 with Magnum TA and Ivan Koloff on top. We'd also see Pistol Pez Watley and Mr. Larson taking on the RPMs. What are your memories of the RPMs? Why don't you think they had a bigger splash in Jim Crockett Promotions than they did?
We didn't pay enough attention to them, promote them the right way, get the right combo for them to have a feud with. I think that's That's in a nutshell. I wish it was better. I wish we could make something with everyone, but then that just not going to happen. They came in when, there's Dusty, there's Magnum. You've got, Rick and Tully, all those guys, Arn Anderson, they're kicking up. And, we're thinking about Vince, and a lot of things slip through the cracks.
Listen, we often say in business, or at least I do, timing is everything. Do you think that the timing was maybe off on the RPMs for them to be a bigger deal?
Yes. Yes.
Is that a function?
It was the wrong time for them.
Is that a function more of, is that a function more of who's the booker and who's got the quote unquote pencil? Is it more of the promoter? I mean, just talk me through, like, how could someone's timing be off? Because I think a lot of us listening, we think about certain talent, maybe that we were really big fans of as kids. And we think, man, why did they never do more with that guy? But if you take a look at the whole roster, man, especially in this era for you guys, to your point, you've got Nikita, you've got Magnum, you've got Ric Flair, you've got the Horseman, you got Tully Blanchard, you got Arn Anderson, you got the Rock and Roll Express, you got the Midnights, and. I mean, this roster is going to continue to grow and grow and grow. It's really hard to stand out in a locker room like that, right?
Well, to stand out, to show us something that, and the fans too. You got to remember, the fans, we pay a lot of attention to what the fans are saying and doing. And it just didn't happen. I wish it did, but it didn't. And I'm sure that they did well elsewhere, right?
Well, there you go. You've also said, it was pretty clear the television title is a big deal. And oftentimes it's one of those deals where you've got a 20-minute deal to finish that title. We made an exception here on Friday, April 5th. $8,700 was what we drew at the gate for Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard, and a television title match with a 60-minute time limit. Just thinking from the mind of a booker, a matchmaker, if you will, extending the time limit for the television title from 20 minutes to 60 minutes, as little of a thing it is, boy, that could be really special and important in terms of telling a story, no?
Yes, because 20 minutes, Tully can jump in and out of the ring, and Baby Doll can be around him, and they could kill 20 minutes.
There you go.
Kill it. Yeah. So they could kill 30 minutes, but an hour?
It's hard.
It would be extremely hard. So that's why the hour time limit. And with an hour, the fans know that eventually Dusty is going to get hold of Tully, and he is going to try to get hold of Baby Doll. That's what everybody wants to see.
No doubt.
Yeah.
I'm curious from your perspective, when you think about Dusty Rhodes, I mean, I think a lot of people who are listening to this think of Dusty Rhodes a certain way. And by and large, Mr. Crockett, we've got listeners who are my age. And I have to admit that my first introduction to Dusty Rhodes, before I became what I would call the super fan, and maybe even go so far as to say, quote unquote, smart mark, I was first introduced to Dusty Rhodes through the WWF version of him. So it's a heavier set fellow wearing the black and yellow polka dots and talking about being a common man. But boy, if you go back through the 80s and you go back through the late 70s, Dusty Rhodes was one of the top box office attractions in the entire country. Beyond that, even the entire world. But when you see a 60-minute time limit, I'm sure a lot of our younger listeners are thinking, well, Dusty didn't go 60 minutes, but Dusty did go 60 minutes, and you were there and you saw it a lot. Can you speak to the perception of Dusty Rhodes as maybe he got a little older and put on a little more weight? Those folks really missed out on a magical time for Dusty Rhodes and his fans, right?
Yes. Once Dusty got in the ring, he put on a show. He did not lay around, lay on the guy, lay on the ropes. Yes, he did not have the stamina, let's say, of Magnum TA, Nikita Koloff, a Ric Flair, a Tully Blanchard. But the thing is, they could work it to the point that could go an hour, and the fans will be standing on their feet for a solid hour. There's so much that can be done, and you have, let's call it, you don't keep the fans up the whole time. You got to bring them back down, then bring them up, and just start manipulating them. That's the power of the wrestlers in the ring. And you see that, the booker has one thing. He has to book the best talent for the cities, the television, and the angles that would carry on, for X number of weeks or months. Now, the thing is, you try to make sure that the talent, it's not the same match in every single city, because definitely they'll get tired of it. And how do you change it up? And that all depends on the talent in the ring. They're the ones that have to go the hour. The booker is not doing it.
There you go.
Yeah. The wrestlers are. And in this case, you had three people, that helped. You had a referee in there, that I guarantee they used him a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah, of course. You use the props that you have to give the fans the best show that you can.
Well, everybody got a show on Saturday, April 6th. I can't believe this is real, but in Charlotte, North Carolina, you guys drew $19,000, and what a main event that did it. It's a lights out, no disqualification, bunkhouse rules, barbed wire around the ring for Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard. Underneath, we've got Magnum TA and the Masked Superstar Bill Eadie. We've also got the World Tag Team title on the line with Ivan and Nikita Koloff taking on the Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez and Don Carnoodle. The Lumberjack match between Jimmy Valiant and the Barbarian, and on and on and on. But boy, this is such a main event. Before we talk about that, I want to ask you about Bill Eadie. We know that Bill Eadie has been a bona fide superstar, literally, pardon the pun, as Masked Superstar. He's going to go on to become part of Demolition and become a national star through national television. But you were there when he was Masked Superstar. What can you tell us about Bill Eadie? We haven't spent a lot of time talking about him.
One of the nicest people you'll ever meet. Really. One of the nicest people. True professional. I can't say enough good things about Bill. We met at one of the fan festivals and renewed friendship, and he just really a great guy, wonderful wrestler, really knew his craft. As you could tell, he was part of Demolition, and they just, there again, that was the right time, for him. We did well with him. He did well here. And so he went on and even did better.
Well, the main event, hard to find any better than that. Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard. Let's recap the steps here. Lights out, which has always made me chuckle a little bit because we don't actually turn the lights out. No disqualification. Bunkhouse rules. Barbed wire around the ring. Now we know we've seen some pretty, I guess we call them infamous scars on Dusty's arm from the barbed wire. Was Tully Blanchard maybe nervous or hesitant about doing a barbed wire match, or is this just part of the job here in 1985?
I'm sure he was nervous. Who in their right mind would want to jump in a ring with true barbed wire? That was real barbed wire. No rubber or anything like that. That was true barbed wire. And the fans knew it was going to get bloody. And it did. And for Tully, growing up in a wrestling family,
there you
as
go.
Tully did, all right, he knew what he had to do to draw money. And this was one of those things, to let's say satisfy the people somewhat, but not completely, because Tully will go on and get dusty again. So it's, you give them a taste of victory, but then you're going to shut the door on. Yeah, I'm not saying that that Tully won the match. Then Tully lost, I'm sure.
Right.
It just, it had to happen. This is Dusty's match. And I'm sure Baby Doll was around there, and Dusty probably, after he beat Tully, would bailed out to try to get her. She probably was a streak of lightning out the door. So there again, they gave the fans something they wanted, and that was blood. And there was a lot of it. Anytime those two wrestled, it's something to behold. Like you said, you look at Dusty's arms, you look at his head.
Yes.
His body's got scars all over it, from matches.
Let me ask you about that, because I've always been curious from a promoter standpoint, especially back here in the 80s. There was a phrase that was used: red turns to green. The idea being fans are going to be more interested to see a battle that becomes a real war, a real bloody battle. And if we've got folks who are bleeding, then it's more likely to lead to an uptick in ticket sales and the next gate and the next event, et cetera, et cetera. I get all that. But I do wonder, as a promoter, is that a delicate balancing act of when to do it and when not to do it? And I'm wondering, from your perspective, do you ask guys, hey, we'd like to get a little color here, or do you leave it up to them? Do they know, like, hey, this is good for the business? Is it sort of understood, or do you have to ask?
We ask in a way. You talk over the whole program, and they will eventually suggest a little blood here and there. Too much blood doesn't work.
Right.
It's like too much chocolate pie. You can eat too much and you'll turn the fans off. So you don't want that, but add a little bit here and there. That's fine. I personally, I wouldn't ask, it's always been, they said, well, this, we need to do this. We need to get some juice, as they said. At one time, Art Nelson, you remember the wrestler Art Nelson?
I do.
All right. And we had sort of a bare knuckles match. I forget who he was against, and I was his second.
Okay.
And I had to gig him, and that is the first time I've ever done it to anyone. And I just tell you, you can feel that, and he said, "Neighbor, kid, neighbor, ah!" So I'm like, got him. So I watch how you look at Vince though. Vince doesn't want any blood at all.
Well, I mean, he still does it every now and again, but yeah, by and large, he's decided it's not good for his sponsors. And a few years ago, he even had Brock Lesnar bust open Randy Orton, quote unquote, the hard way, which is much more dangerous than what's ruled as maybe self-mutilation. I mean, I hate to use that term, but I mean, that's kind of what it is, where you're cutting yourself with a razor. Listen, once upon a time, you yourself, I don't know that a lot of our listeners maybe know this, but you yourself stepped between the ropes and you were a wrestler. You competed. Did you ever,
I did,
quote unquote, get color?
I never did. I was not high enough on the card.
Well, good for you. Well, you know what? You just hit on something.
An opening. I was a job guy. Come on. I was an opening. Really. Wow. I was a job guy. I was a good job guy.
I love you for that. Hey, so chat me up about that. Was there, you're saying I was an opening guy, but I saw, back in the day, at least my day, we call it the 90s. I would go to an ECW house show not a televised event, people in the first match would be bleeding. Is there?
Now, see,
it means
that doesn't make sense. That's when you're talking about too much.
Right.
All right. If the first match starts to bleed, then the next match got to bleed a little bit. And then what? At the main event, you're going to kill somebody, hang them.
Right.
You know, you don't start out with a finish in the beginning. You've got to
build to
first
it.
Match. And the first match is to get the people pumped up, excited, off their butts. Come on, and then the next match and it continues. Color first match doesn't work for me.
Let me ask you about this, because you were there at an interesting time in WCW. And I know we're pivoting here because we're talking about 1985, but I can't help myself. I have such a good time talking to you. And 1991, you guys ran Halloween Havoc at the UTC Chattanooga. It was the Chamber of Horrors. And what a night it was. At the same time, all of a sudden the Braves went from worst to first, and they're in the World Series here. And you guys are not too far outside of Atlanta and Chattanooga. I mean, you're maybe an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at most,
right?
Maybe an hour, depending on how fast you drive. But still, the opening match, you electrocuted a man in Abdul the Butcher because it was the Chamber of Horrors match. And that was sort of the title of the show, the Chamber of Horrors. But because it was this big structure and all the gimmicks, you guys made the call to do that match first. And
I want to tell you why. Let me tell you why.
Please do.
Yeah. I've got to tell you why. All right. And Spanky, Abdullah the Butcher. And
wait. You call him Spanky?
Yeah, I call him Spanky.
And why do you call Abdullah the Butcher Spanky?
I've always called him I don't know.
That's tremendous. I love that Abdullah the Butcher Spanky. Continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. It's just, he was such a character. I had so enjoyed him. All right. So I had over 20 pounds of gunpowder in the gutters around the ring up above that fence area. There was a match before because they hit the ring or the cage, I think it was, and some of the gunpowder was coming onto the mat and the floor, and I went, oh my God, what's going to happen? So get to the point, Abdullah's in there, and they put him in the chair, and that happens, and that whole damn ring went up. The gunpowder was everywhere, and it all, from the sparks from the gunpowder going off, and what we had gutters around came down and lit the gunpowder on the ring and outside the ring. And all right. Abdullah said, it was beautiful. He said, I thought I was being electrocuted. I love that one.
I'm just curious, how do we start with a match where in match number 1, we electrocute a man, but in match number 2, arm drags?
It was, unfortunately, Jim Hurt was there, wasn't he?
Well, he
wasn't
was.
that 91? Wasn't that Jim Hurt?
It was, yeah.
Okay.
All right.
That explains it.
That
explains it. Hey, come on. That explains it.
Well said. All
right. Yeah. That's, that's definitely,
Well, this same day, as we get back to 1985, on Saturday, April 6th, not only do you have this barbed wire match with Dusty Rhodes and Billy Blanchard and Charlotte that draws you 19 grand, you've got $1,688. That's right. Less than $2,000 over in Newberry, South Carolina. Is that too a spot show? Or is
yes, it is.
Okay.
Spot show. It was, I think, a college over there, or it might be high school. But yes, that was a spot show. And if you look at the card, the card is such that, you put bodies, and we had a responsibility to keep our wrestlers working.
Mm.
I think, as you well know, AEW, some of the wrestlers, I think, have complained in the past about they need more work,
Yep.
get more money. All right. Well, that's, and two, Newberry was a short trip.
There you go.
You don't send them 200 miles or 500 miles away to do that.
Or 2,000 miles. Yeah.
Right. So, that you keep them working, it's, and some of them, that means they can go see their girlfriend on the way home.
Listen,
it's a short trip. Come on.
I'm glad you mentioned that because I was not going to bring it up, but listen, it was part of the business back here in 1985, but a lot of guys had a wife at home. Mm-hmm. And then there would have other friends on the road. And This is the era where there aren't cell phones. There's no Apple iPhone tags, and there's no trackers, and there's not even pagers here. The only way you got a hold of somebody is if you went over to a pay phone and dropped some quarters in it, or use the phone in your hotel room and called a landline, which most folks listening to this don't even have a landline. So in those days, when you were gone, you were sort of gone.
Yes. Out of sight, out of mind.
It had to be a big contributing factor, even though it feels less than for us to talk about it. But these guys are television stars, and they're making good money, and they're on a stage, and they have a platform, and that's attractive to a lot of folks. And they say, man, I'd like to be a part of that at any means necessary. I don't care if he's got this or that going on. That was a big part of the wrestling business in the 80s, was it not?
Oh, yes. Yes, it was. It's sort of, they put themselves in their character at that time. It's, and they don't go back to being Virgil Reynolds.
There you go.
Or, I'm not saying, but
I get you.
Yeah. They don't go back being a regular guy.
Ric Flair couldn't turn it off. Ric Flair couldn't turn it off. I mean, he still can't turn it off. He's still Ric Flair. Now, we all know, listening to this, he's actually Richard Morgan Fleer, but you couldn't tell him that. He's Ric Flair, and he's going to be Ric Flair forever and ever. Amen. And maybe
he will die. He will die Ric Flair.
Yes. And maybe some folks thought, I kind of want to see if he really is a 60-minute man. Let's see if he's Ric Flair. Let's live the legend. And that probably had some appeal to certain folks, right?
At certain folks. And I think the legend wanted to put a few notches in his gun. And he was proud of his gun.
There you go. Well said.
Hey, yeah. So, you're his son-in-law, so I don't know how far we go on this.
Well, listen, here's the thing. I've heard a lot of people say you don't really know Ric Flair unless you've seen his gimmick. Well, I must not really know Ric Flair because I met Ric Flair in the 60s, and I somehow, some way,
I don't think he'd want to show you his gimmick.
I don't need to see it. I don't need to see that in action. But let me ask you this, sincerely, that had to be one of the motivating factors for a lot of, listen, I've heard a lot of rock stars and musicians say they first picked up a guitar because they wanted to meet girls. And this was a gateway to that. Well, wrestling in another way was a display of that. Here's a guy out here who's going to be tall and handsome and in good shape and in, trunks or whatever. And now he's on television and he's standing up in the ring and everybody's hooting and hollering. I can see how that would be attractive, but I've also heard over the years that there were certain territories that were more known for, those extracurricular activities. And I know that a lot of guys went to Memphis because maybe it didn't pay that well, but there were other benefits that guys would say, okay, we'll figure something out because I like this or that or what have you. Was there a town where you knew, by God, we got to make sure we get all the boys in the ring in this town because blah, blah, blah. Was there a town that was more prolific in that regard than others for those outside of the ring activities?
Baltimore.
Okay.
Richmond,
All right.
Norfolk, because you're getting further and further away from home.
Okay.
Uh,
So it was less based on the
Raleigh. Yeah.
I love that it just hit you like a lightning bolt. Raleigh was a good town.
Because they had to stay over anyway for TV.
Okay.
You had a Norton Arena on Tuesday, you had TV on Wednesday, and then Thursday would be a spot show or Norfolk.
There's
So
even
they were gone 3 days.
There's even some wrestlers
at least
who maybe hypothetically, as the story goes, would be staying at the company hotel, meet a lovely waitress and decide, she's a big fan. Maybe she should be my wife, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. that has happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about Sunday, April 7th. We're in Roanoke, Virginia, $8,200 there. We got the U.S. title in the main event. We got Magnum TA taking on Tully Blanchard just one day after his barbed wire main event against Dusty Rhodes. Underneath is Raging Bull taking on Arn Anderson. And for the World Tag Team titles, we got the Koloffs taking on Kernoodle and Larson. We've also got Boogie Woogie Man working with Barbarian. Meanwhile, at the bottom of the page, we see underlined Orlando, Dusty Rhodes. Of course, Dusty Rhodes is a big doggone deal in Florida, and now he's going to be heading down to Orlando. Not a JCP show, but still, we're keeping the guys busy, even if it means the guy who actually booked all of this stuff. Let's talk about Monday, April 8th. You're in Greenville, South Carolina. Heck of a gate here, $12,200, especially on a Monday night.
Well, it's a good Monday town.
It's a great Monday town. And let's remind everybody, just the day before, Dusty's in Orlando, but he's back here to do a bunkhouse rules match for the TV title against Tully Blanchard. Underneath is Magnum TA and Nikita Koloff. Meanwhile, that same day you ran a second show, which is clearly some sort of a booster show. Hampton, South Carolina, only $900 on the gate. This had to be disappointing when you see those receipts, no?
It is, and I'll go back. We can only do so much promoting it on our television.
That's right.
We send them radio tapes. We send them posters. We send them newspaper ads. So, we could set up radio interviews with a wrestler. It depends on if the booster club were go-getters. If they expected us to do everything, it's not going to happen. Not going. That is, a fundraiser is when, the people that are fundraising want to raise money. And I'm going to get away from this, but Wilmington, North Carolina, the Wilmington Soccer Association, we promoted with them in Wilmington outdoors at football stadium in spring and summer. They, on an event basis, had sold out every time, and they only had 2 price tickets. It was a $10 ticket and a $5 ticket for kids. But all ringside was 10, and you could sit. Oh, it was amazing, and they'd sell out. Eddie Godwin was the guy that represented the soccer association there. So if you want it, you can do it. If you're expecting us to do it for you, it's not going to happen.
Let's talk about what is happening here on Tuesday, April 9th. Ocean City, Maryland draws 6,000 people, or $6,000 rather, for Magnum TA and Tully Blanchard. That same day, we run TV in Winston-Salem. $4,800 there, 2 sets of tapings. Man, these double shots, this is a lot to keep up with. When I talked to your brother a few years ago, he was pretty clear in saying if he had one regret, it was that he didn't hire enough staff. But he was really focusing on things like promotions, marketing, et cetera, not just actually running the shows. Do you think that that was maybe the weak spot, that she didn't have enough help from a promoting standpoint, from a merchandising standpoint, from a licensing standpoint, or did you need more help just running the actual shows too?
Jimmy was a micromanager.
Mm.
Jimmy was a microman. He was not going to let go of it.
Okay.
I found that out when they gave me the job to renovate the ballpark and get the ball team in Charlotte, the Charlotte O's. Well, he didn't mess around with me when I was renovating the ballpark, but when I got the team there, he could not stay away. Just drove me crazy. Advertising, everything. I just, yeah. So luckily, I went. That next year, I went and started our television production company. So, yeah, he left me alone pretty much there. But when it came to marketing, and he just, I don't know, he had this way.
He couldn't delegate.
No, he tried. That he had a friend, Rob Gardner, who worked for WBT television, radio. His wife was a salesperson for WBT, and I think that he was hiring friends, not good business people. How's that sound?
People he thought he could trust, not necessarily people he could trust to do the job.
Right. And he could trust, but that doesn't mean that
they could do
the
it.
Job.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. No. So some of them just couldn't do it. Couldn't do it. They, Jimmy wouldn't let them. It's, whereas Bill Shaw, with Turner would. And you'd be responsible for it. If you screwed up or didn't do it, then, and Ted was the same way. So, that some people can do it. It was very hard for me at first to back away from some of the television production and manage. I was basically doing everything, knew everything, and lights, sound, TV, and finally, one of the guys came in and said, "You need a production manager." I went, "What? What's that?" And then finally, I caught on. But my job is to manage and get the best product out there. For me to keep my fingers in everything, it doesn't work. And Jimmy's the same way. He and Dusty creative, but sometimes they needed to back off and let us do our job and not wait until the 9th hour and tell us, well, we need this tomorrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about
trying to keep it too close to the vest.
April 10th is a Wednesday, and you guys are not playing it close to the vest. You're in Vince McMahon's backyard here, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with Magnum TA and Tully Blanchard on top. Jimmy Valiant and the Barbarian in a lumberjack match, 74-24 at the gate. Meanwhile, on Thursday, the 11th, you're back in Fredericksburg, Virginia for $5,065 for Magnum TA versus Buddy Landale for the U.S. title. And then in Tazewell, Virginia, $1,700.
Tazewell.
My goodness.
Tazewell, Virginia. Shame on you.
Spot show, to say the least. Am I right?
Oh, yes. That is true.
It's a Friday in Norfolk. You get $9,400 there for the U.S. title. Magnum TA and Tully Blanchard, Raging Bull and Arn Anderson, Jimmy Valiant and Superstar Billy Graham in a lumberjack match. Meanwhile, also in Winchester, Virginia, with the tag titles. And here you start to see a lot of names scratched. Are these names scratched because they weren't available, because they got other bookings? Why do you see we start to see so many names scratched here and yon? I mean, clearly this was JJ. Maybe is this what Dusty picked and then they weren't available? Or more often than not, is it a double booking circumstance? If you had to guess, because I realize that's what we're doing all these years later. If you had to guess when a name is scratched, what more often
Where's the
than
town?
not?
Where's the town again?
This is the big town of Winchester, Virginia. $2,400 here.
Winchester. All right, that's it's an awkward place. It's outside of Washington. It's outside of Richmond. It's towards the mountains. Probably trying to figure out whether, and it was more of a spot show than a true building. So I venture to say, trying to put the best talent in places that would get more revenue.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Speaking of revenue, let's talk about Saturday. What a big show it is. Greensboro, the spiritual home of Starcade, $18,300. Greensboro, North Carolina would see Lights Out, TV title, Bunkhouse Rules, Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard. And for the U.S. title, Magnum TA and Buddy Landell. Of course, we got a tag title match and all kinds of other stuff, but $18,300 here. But at the bottom of the page, you see a big show in Atlanta, Georgia at the Omni. And as you could see in blue pen there, Sunday, April 14th. So it's not actually a Saturday show. It's a Sunday show. You guys did run your own shows on Sunday. We'll talk about that. But here in the Omni in Atlanta, there's $31,000 here to see Ric Flair wrestle Michael P.S. Hayes. It's in the notes here as Freebird Hayes. We would also see Ole and Arn Anderson tag teaming to take on Thunderfoot or Thunderbolt Patterson rather, and the Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez. We'd also see
Thunderfoot. I like Thunderfoot.
Hey, there was a Thunderfoot once upon a time, but Thunderbolt. We also get Buddy Landell with JJ in his corner taking on Magnum TA. $31,000 here, but that's not all you're doing on Sunday, the 14th. You're also running Richmond, Virginia for $43,000, but that's a 2 p.m. show. So it's a matinee show where we would see an Indian strap match for the world title. Flair and Wahoo is your world title main event. Bunkhouse Rules, barbed wire around the ring again for Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard in a matinee show. But you didn't just one run matinee show. Easy for me to say.
No.
You ran two, another one in Asheville, North Carolina with Magnum TA and Tully Blanchard. So let's just recap here for a minute. Your day on Sunday, April 14th. You start the day with a 2 p.m. show in Richmond, Virginia, 43 grand. An hour later, Asheville, North Carolina kicks off, and it's another 63. But then that night, you guys all cruise to Atlanta, $31,000 at the gate. Talk about a banner day for Jim Crockett Promotions. This is hard to beat, man.
That's right. And two, you got to remember this is in the 80s, and that amount of money was a lot of money.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a lot of money still, but it's just then. Yeah, things started clicking. Things started taking off. There again, we had exactly what the people wanted. The promotion was good. Talking about the advertising, marketing on TV, radio, and the people knew they were going to see something special on all three of those events, and they did. And it was well worth it.
To your point, Richmond, Virginia, that drew $43,000 that day. In $1985, it was $43,000. In $2023, that's $119 grand. So pretty substantial.
Yes.
Let's cruise on over to Monday. Once again, you've got a ton of shows. You see in the margins up top. This is real, y'all. There's 4 shows run on this day. It's a Monday. It's April 15th. It's tax day. And in Milledgeville, Georgia, we draw $2,614. In Greenville, South Carolina, we've got $57.84 with Landell and Magnum TA on top. In Fayetteville, North Carolina, with Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard in yet another barbed wire TV match, We've got $12,100, including an undercard match where it says karate is legal, which makes me laugh in hindsight. And then Altoona, Pennsylvania, we had Raging Bull versus Arn Anderson, $3,100, 4 shows in a single day. How much of this can be attributed to you guys getting back TV, or would this have been the plan no matter what?
Oh no, it all had to do with television. Altoona, it was, promoters, other promoters, Middledgeville, that was the Atlanta group, that we had at that time. Greenville and Fayetteville were our steady towns. So these others were, add-ons. So that, Altoona, you look at that really doesn't fit as far as with our, and we didn't have our main talent there. Right. So
it feels like once upon a time when running in Vince's backyard was a priority, and we would book like guys like Sergeant Slaughter and Bob Backlund and, superstar Billy Graham. And then eventually it's like, well, here's some guys.
Yeah. Well, and two, at that time, Backlund, he was wanting to do some promotion. Superstar Billy Graham, yes, we had him, and we knew that he'd do well, his name wise. So we'd put him up there.
Well, let's talk about who else you're putting out there. It's a Tuesday, April 16th. You're going to send Pistol Pez Watley over to Talladega, Alabama. And then you're going to run a show in Rock Hill, South Carolina for $24,000 with Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard. We're also going to run, that's a TV taping, by the way.
Yes.
Meanwhile, right. You're running Allentown, Pennsylvania for $3,300 with the Raging Bull and Arn Anderson. So you got talent in 3 separate shows here. Man, you guys are busier than ever. And I'm curious because you mentioned a few moments ago, hey, that's when we had the Georgia territory. And I'm curious, what kind of arrangement was there in the early months of this TBS era, the expansion into Georgia, as far as it and the traditional Mid-Atlantic territory being run as separate circuits? Because a lot of these towns that are quote unquote Georgia aren't in Jimmy's Red Books that we're going over here, even when they're primarily featuring JCP talent. Was the call made to keep, or why was the call made to keep the circuits quote unquote separate until fall?
Well, you had Fred Ward, the Wards down there in Georgia, keeping them somewhat happy. Ole was still down there. Then, up in Altoona, Allentown, Pennsylvania, that was Backlund, maybe Gary Jester. Now I'm trying to think back, we did not send one of our agents up there. So let's put it that way. So we had a co-promotion, both in Talladega and also Allentown. The Rock Hill was us, our TV taping. Rock Hill is at the most 40 minutes away from Charlotte. So, that was at the college gym, Winthrop College there in Rock Hill. It's a good place.
It's a great place. In Wednesday, April 17th, we run Raleigh. We got $4,695 with Magnum TA versus Buddy Landell. Meanwhile, we're going to run Marietta, Ohio for a lot more money, $8,018. Not a ton of star power on that either. These days, people would say things like, oh, it's an emerging market for us. We would see, go ahead.
We were sending talent up there for the promotion, that they had the rest of it. They had the ring and all that, and they had a lot that we were just trying to, fend off, Vince in a lot of ways that, to me, Ohio, Pennsylvania, those smaller towns didn't work for me just because cost ratio of sending them up and back, and they're having to stay. It just, and we weren't in the area long enough. We didn't have, in some cases, we probably had local TV. In other cases, we were promoting it strictly off TBS. Well, only TBS can only do so much. So that's something we have to think about.
Columbia, South Carolina.
And sometimes we did. All right.
Columbia, South Carolina gets you guys' attention on April 18th. It's a Thursday. Magnum TA and Tully Blanchard, $6,084 at the gate here. You can see at the bottom of the page, Williamson, West Virginia. Let's see Alexander, Watley, and Fever on that show. Friday the 19th, Marion, Virginia had to be a disappointment. Only $1,511 with the Koloffs taking on the Canoodles on top. Lenore, North Carolina, much bigger, much better. $8,170 for Magnum TA versus Tully Blanchard. But you had a third show, Charleston, West Virginia, with Arn Anderson, Raging Bull, Alexander, Pistol Pez Watley. At any point, did you think, Jimmy, maybe we're running too many shows? Or did that never even cross your mind?
Oh, yes. And also, again, I go back to, all right, Marion, Virginia, that was a spot show. Charleston, West Virginia, that we just sent talent. And to me, eventually, Charleston, was a pretty good town later on down the road. Now, Lenore was a spot show, and that was April. It was outside football stadium. And that's an hour from Charlotte, Lenore. It's up near Boone, Blowing Rock, up in the mountains. So I'm looking at the two West Virginia shows. We had Charleston, West Virginia, and what's that? Williamson, West Virginia. We're sending talent to a promoter that they're going to put their matches together. I didn't particularly care for it, but there again, we're giving talent, work.
Well, you're giving some work on Saturday, April 20th too. Conway, South Carolina gets $11,189 when we see Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard for a television title match set for 60 minutes. Another U.S. title match with Magnum TA and Buddy Landell. Meanwhile, we've got a show in Jacksonville, Florida with the Koloffs, and a third show in Cleveland, Ohio that does pretty well. $19,093 with big stars like Joel Deaton, Alexander, Pistol Pez Watley, and Fever. Why are you laughing at that, Mr. Crockett?
I'm just him. I apologize.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. But we're just sending talent.
Yes.
We're not sending matches. It was not booked. It was not our booking. Same thing with Jacksonville, Florida.
Let me ask you this.
Yes.
I've always been curious about this because, as you know, Tony Schiavone, our mutual friend at this point, he and I watched 1986 week by week, all of your television that year, and it was fantastic. And I, for the first time, saw and fell in love with Pistol Pez Watley. Now, that's a name I had heard a lot, and I had seen his matches here and there, but to actually see his promos, I can sit here and defend that Pistol Pez Watley was ahead of his time on promos. And I'm curious, why didn't Pistol Pez Watley get a bigger push in that era? Was it a size thing? Was his style of promo just ahead of its time? Or was it just in the territory, man, it was easier to have black heels as opposed to black baby faces? I mean, and I know that is a polarizing thing to say now, but when you think about Junkyard Dog, he was really like the first super over face of a promotion black baby face. This is a different era, and we are a Southern promotion. So in all transparency and candor, If you had it to do over again, would Pistol Pez Whatley have been pushed more? Or was it based more on he wasn't that good in the ring? He wasn't that big. The South wasn't ready for it. Because that dude could talk his ass off, could he not?
Yeah. Pez developed himself here. He came and he wasn't that polished diamond when he first came here. So the interviews, the work, he was trying to be not himself. He was trying to be like, well, in some cases, Junkyard Dog or Rufus R. Freight Train Jones, or trying to be somewhat like Thunderbolt Patterson. He needed to be himself. And he really didn't click until he became himself. He had his own words, not somebody else's words. And then his work, started getting better. He didn't have to shuck and jive. That's, wasn't him. And he definitely could wrestle. He could definitely put on a show. So size somewhat, yes. We started getting bigger guys in, but there was sort of a place for him. But I think if he had been polished somewhere else and came in, it'd be a different story. I think that, what is it? You can't see the weeds for the forest.
Yeah, there you go. Forest for the trees.
Forest for the trees. The same way, here was this person that developed into it, but you were used to looking at him in a different light. So
I agree. Listen, I understand. I get it. Let's talk about Sunday, April 21st. It's April here, and we've got a bunch of shows. We got, and I can't believe this is real, Dusty Rhodes in Orlando. In Mansfield, Ohio, we got a bunch of talent: Alexander, Deaton, Watley, and Fever. In Savannah, Georgia, it's a 7:30 show, an evening show with Magnum TA and Buddy Landell. But before we get there, we've got Sumter, South Carolina with Magnum TA and Tully Blanchard. 39-11 in Sumter, 52-79 in Savannah, 48-79 in Ohio. Man, you guys are running a bunch of shows. This is a lot to keep track of. Travel, talent, buildings. Right. Who else were sort of the key players behind the scenes besides yourself, besides Jimmy, besides Mr. Rhodes, besides Mr. Dillon? Who are the talent who are integral to keeping this train on the tracks as far as booking buildings and communicating with the talent? Who, what, when, where, why, and so forth?
Well, I was booking buildings, believe it or not.
How did that go?
How did that go? I tell our promoters, send me in. I've got these X dates. But Jimmy come in and drop, Ohio down on me, or, Dusty's, going to be in Orlando. All the Florida and Ohio dates, he just sort of dropped in my lap. And so you have to back off some dates, in your own area to make accommodations for the other shows. Now Sumter is 2 hours from Savannah. Sumter is also about 2 hours from Charlotte. So that was a hop. You go from Charlotte to Sumter, you wrestle in Sumter, then you go on to Savannah, then you drive back home. 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours, that night. So, and usually Savannah was a better Sunday town for us because it's a tourist town, and we don't depend on the tourist, but depend on the working people. So Sunday's the changeover. And so they would come into Savannah, not Savannah proper. It's into Savannah for the wrestling matches.
It was around this era that Dave Meltzer would write in the Wrestling Observer, quote, "I'm not sure about this, but rumors are out that Ted Turner will be getting involved with this promotion. I'm not sure what effect that will have on wrestling. However, Now, as a reminder, you guys have purchased back the time slot from Vince McMahon,
Right.
but was there any truth to this report from Dave, or is this just conjecture? He just assumes sort of, well, if they're on that station, he must be involved, or was Ted actually becoming more and more involved?
Let me ask, what do you mean by involved?
What was Ted? Let me just ask you this differently. In 1985, we'll call it April of 1985, just a few weeks after the very first WrestleMania, you guys are on that station, WTBS. Was Ted Turner involved beyond providing the platform, the station? Was he involved in thinking or having discussions about who wrestled when, who won what? None, any wrestling business whatsoever.
No, he would tell you now, Ted wouldn't keep it a secret. He would watch it. Sometimes he would come down, to the Saturday tapings, but most of them he'd watch it on television. He and Jimmy had an excellent relationship. Now you remember, Jimmy, when Ted sailed for the America's Cup, Jimmy sailed on Ted's own boat, Tenacious, and watching the race. And they drank together. So this was, I think this was in between marriages for Jimmy. And Jimmy saw, and we all saw, that Ted loved us. Ted's always loved it. The people at the people that the board of directors hated us. We didn't, when I'm going to go past this, when he bought us, we did not have a living chance in hell to make it work. Because here's Ted Turner. He has all these stations that he's responsible for.
Right.
And no one on his board wanted us. Jack Petrie was forced, and then the rest of them started coming in. The only person that finally was Bill Shaw, who was head of HR, and Bill, to tell you, he had more fun, with us than any other time at Turner. And he's an original Turner guy, original. So, but the rest of them, and Bill will tell you, they didn't want us. We were beneath them, socially unacceptable. And Ted used us to his advantage because we got good ratings, better than the other channels, programs, sports. The Braves, Braves started doing well when they were in the pennant race. But otherwise, the basketball team, you name it, other stuff that they had, no, we killed it. We killed it. And Ted would throw us up against them and just lambaste them, saying, why can't you guys do this?
Right.
And it's not costing me that much. With wrestling, they want to make money. So we were socially, we were delegated to the back of the bus or even off the bus. Matter of fact, they didn't want us on the bus.
Well, let's talk about some other things that are happening.
Let's do that. Let's do that.
Your rivalry here with the other promotions. It's written in the Observer. WrestleMania was shown on April 6th in Pittsburgh on the ABC television affiliate for free in its entirety. And the word is that the fellow who owns the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh, where the WrestleMania feed didn't work and the fans rioted, well, the owner of that promotion reached out to Vince and said, if you don't show the card for free on television, you'll never get another date in the building. And instead, he would book shows for the AWA or Jim Crockett. I find this story fascinating. And I also like that this is the era where Dave Meltzer felt like he was going to end the Observer because he had started his job at the Soccer America magazine. And he wrote Tony Chavante, which is Chavante, is getting plenty of good reviews for his work on the Crockett's WTBS show. The show itself is getting a mixed, slightly negative reaction from those who have contacted me. Now, of course, we don't know who's actually contacted Mr. Meltzer and what they were saying, but from your perspective, were fans digging what you guys were doing on TBS?
They dug it before we left, and they dug it when we came back.
There you go.
I mean, come on. We were a staple for TBS. It was Georgia Championship Wrestling. The Gunkles, were there. And then what, Tommy Rich?
Yep.
And then we came along, and it was just as fast, even faster paced. And then too, with the just the things we would do on Saturday were unbelievable. Slapstick, nothing was rehearsed, nothing. You didn't have a script. It just, here we go. And all ad lib. And the matches were exciting. Yeah, you had job guys and so forth. And but then again, we knew that we needed to get good ratings on Turner because of the relationship of Jimmy and Ted. So we would do that. We would always check our ratings. And then too, I'm going past this, the specials that we did for TBS before TBS bought us. And that was all just for Ted and that relationship. And he loved it.
Well, let's talk about the actual first show. And I realize we're going back a little bit in time, but since we're talking about TBS, I want to talk about, I believe it was done at the very beginning of the month here, April 6th. You guys did a TV taping here in Atlanta, Georgia. This is going to be the first episode for Jim Crockett Promotions on WTBS after you've bought it back from Vince. And the show features an interview with Tony Schiavone talking to Ric Flair alongside three women, where Flair's going to mention Dusty Rhodes, Magnum TA, and Michael Hayes as the top contenders. And then Schiavone's going to do an interview with Tully Blanchard alongside Baby Doll, who's going to talk about Dusty Rhodes and his quest to regain the TV title. And then Schiavone's going to do an interview with Ole and Arn Anderson regarding an altercation on the same show. My point is, you got Dusty featured, you got Tully featured, you got Flair featured. Tony Schiavone's the staple. When you guys are really betting it all on this TBS deal, because we've talked about in last month's episode how you guys spent a lot of money and borrowed a lot of money from the bank in order to have this opportunity. How are you so confident that Tony Schiavone was the guy to sort of be the face of this show? It clearly worked out.
I needed to back away.
Okay.
I had faith in Tony, and the only way that you can really know is throw him in the lion's den.
Why did you think you needed to back away? I guess what I was driving at is because most of us who watch this stuff see you and Tony together, but more often than not, you let him drive.
Yes.
And this promotion literally has your name on it. A lot of people can't help themselves and they put themselves out front. Not casting aspersions, just saying Vince McMahon hosted Monday Night Raw and all of his other pet projects until eventually he handed the keys over to guys like Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler. But by and large, it was him. Was there a discussion about how Tony got that spot and not you? Or I'm just curious, why did you say I needed to back away? Why?
Because I'm not the interviewer. I'm the fan.
You are, and you're great at it.
Yeah, I'm the fan. I'm too close to the promotion to not have Tony. That's why we got Tony there. My ultimate goal eventually was to go and direct. And I did that on a lot of the shows that I was not there. If you notice a lot of the, let's say the pay-per-views or the specials we do, I'd disappear and I'd go in the truck and direct the show.
Yeah.
That we had Bob Caudle and Tony, and other announcers that it's not me. I don't have that ego. Maybe I should have. I don't know. That Jimmy and I talked about it. It's just Tony was the youth. If you remember Vince, he said with some of his talent, he was going to go a different direction. He just wanted young people.
Rick Flair,
we needed some younger people. You look at Bob Caudle, and Tom Miller, and what Bob is. God, Bob is 100, isn't he? So it made sense that it shouldn't be the David Crockett show. It could be Crockett, JCP, but not David Crockett. That's Bill Shaw told me that when I asked him. I interviewed for the position that Eric Bischoff eventually took over. He said, Bill said, I can't have a Crockett.
Right.
Come on. And it didn't dawn on me because I wasn't looking at myself in that light. I was looking at myself to help.
Right.
And
not like I deserve it, but I want to help.
Right. But with Tony and I had fun. Tony, I haven't asked Tony, but I think we had a great time. Yeah. It was, I probably, I went a little nuts, I'm sure.
Oh, it was fantastic.
There again, I was a fan. Come on. It was a fan. And that was more important to me to make the viewer feel part of this. I was trying to say what they felt.
Right. I get that.
Okay. All right.
Well, let's talk about Greenville, South Carolina. It's Monday, April 22nd. It's lights out. Tully Blanchard and Dusty Rhodes in a TV title barbed wire match. One fall death match with Raging Bull and Arn Anderson. Tag titles on the line too. $14,352. Meanwhile, your other crew, Deaton, Alexander, and Watley and Fever, they're in Saginaw, Michigan. I felt like those guys had to travel together because they're everywhere together.
Yeah.
Shelby, North Carolina, we get a TV taping on Tuesday, April 23rd. We got $4,500 there. And then, we would also do a show with that same crew we talked about in Michigan here in Toledo, Ohio for $6,800. On the 24th, we've got one show in Whiteville, North Carolina, Magnum TA and Buddy Landell on top for the U.S. title, $5,231. Meanwhile, on Thursday, the 25th, two shows. We got Norfolk, Virginia. Actually, there's three shows. Norfolk, Virginia for $7,500 for a bunkhouse match. That's for the TV title with Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard. Hopefully you've noticed a pattern here. Dusty and Tully were a draw. Magnum would also be on these cards. We should mention that we've got Rocky Mount, Virginia with Buddy Landell working on top. This is clearly a spot show, maybe a booster deal. It shows only $907. Macon, Georgia would see Raging Bull, Arn Anderson, Pez Watley, Fever, and $2,300 there. Three shows on a Thursday. And then as we get to Friday, you know what's coming. It's going to be a big show. Actually, there's two. One show in Albany, Georgia with Arn and Pez and Fever and Raging Bull, but also the big show. Richmond, Virginia, $11,000 here. We got Magnum TA working with Nikita Koloff. Martial arts are legal for Jimmy Valiant and superstar Billy Graham. But the main event, it's Dusty Rhodes versus Tully Blanchard. And here's a fun television title match for 60 minutes, but there's real stakes on the line here. If a pinfall happens, Dusty wins Baby Doll for 30 days. This is an iconic angle, one that people are going to talk about for a long, long time. Winning the services of Baby Doll for 30 days. This is great stuff here, is it not?
Oh, yes, it is. I mean, we rode that or could ride it 6 months to a year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's so many things you could do with this, you know, with Baby Doll and Tully and Dusty can, you know, there's just so much, you know, because you look at the talent. You've got, you know, Tully and Dusty, two very creative people and Baby Doll, you know, she comes from a wrestling family. So yes, you know, and she was very new to the business, but she caught on very quickly, very quickly.
No doubt.
Yes.
We should also mention you got a big show here on Saturday, April 27th in Bluefield, West Virginia, 3250 there for a special challenge match with Crusher Khrushchev taking on Don Carnoodle. Little Rock, Arkansas would see Magnum TA in action, and a whole host of folks down in Columbus, Georgia. Again, this is very much the era where you're still running some Georgia Championship Wrestling shows.
Right.
But when we talk about Sunday, April 28th, there's 3 shows here and we almost run out of paper. And, I mean,
yes,
there's so much going on.
I don't know if you guys can see this. If we can look at this.
It's just filled. It's filled. Oh. And in the upper left-hand corner, you see first day of daylight saving time. And we're trying to save some time as we start on a matinee show in Asheville, North Carolina with a lights out Texas death match with Jimmy Valiant and superstar Billy Graham. Underneath, a no DQ U.S. title match with Magnum TA and Buddy Landell. Raging Bull and Thunderbolt Patterson against the Andersons for $56.94. We also have a show in Marietta, Georgia with Buzz Sawyer working with Crusher Khrushchev on top. And they've got $4,010 there. But the big show, and man, you want to talk about a big show. Charlotte, North Carolina, the home of Jim Crockett Promotions, $46,000 at the gate. And what else would be in the main event? Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard. There must be a winner for the television title. 60 minutes with a $20,000 reward for the winner. But that's not enough. Baby Doll for 30 days will have to follow Dusty's instructions. She's going to be with Dusty Rhodes for 30 days. If he gets a win here.
Dusty, and that match, that one match drew all that.
It did.
Yeah. But look at it. Look at the rest of the card. I mean, the angles, Valiant against Graham, you know, Ivan and Nikita Koloff against Magnum TA and Slater. You know, there's no angle, you know, between them, right? Ole and Arn Anderson against Raging Bull and Thunderbolt Patterson. That's probably, you know, that's waning, you know, as far as that's been going on for a while. That's why they're, you know, you've got Bass against Taylor. Don Carnoodle against RPM, you know, Houston and RPM too. So, you know, I'm going to go out on a limb and I just feel that one match and the caliber of interviews, the two of them, well, I should say the three had, drew that house.
It's remarkable because this show is such a success. It actually gets a write-up in the Charlotte Observer. April 28th is when this article would appear. And it's pretty phenomenal. It's written by Ron Green. And the title is The Frontier is Still Crockett's. And he talks about how it's a sellout and it's not uncommon for pro wrestling to pack the house in Charlotte, but there must always be a hook. And quote, the hook on this night is a big one. We're told that if Blanchard loses, the shapely blonde companion baby doll, who has been nothing but trouble for the American dream everywhere their paths have crossed, will be Dusty Rhodes for 30 days. To do with as he see fits, one assumes. As we fast forward through the article here, with the wrestling ring on as a base, the Crockett family over the years has branched off into such ventures as restaurants, real estate, fishing equipment, big band and rock shows, the Charlotte O's baseball team, and its most promising revenue generator, television production. This year marks the golden anniversary of Jim Crockett Sr. in Charlotte. He actually helped put on wrestling shows in Charlotte for a few years, but that he was living in Bristol, Tennessee, but the law required that he be a resident to be a licensed promoter. He and his wife, Lib, moved to Charlotte and brought entertainment magic with them that has turned into a shoestring operation into a multi-million-dollar industry. Jim Sr., a man blessed with promotional genius, died at age 64 and 73, but Lib and their children, Francis 44, Jim Jr. 40, David 38, and Jackie 37, have sustained and enhanced what he built. To celebrate this 50th year, Jim Crockett Promotions plans to stage an extra special wrestling show sometime this year in Charlotte and charge $2 admission. Jim Jr., who confesses he doesn't exactly know what the appeal of pro wrestling is, says the key to the Crockett success has been making sure the customer always gets his money's worth and is treated well by everyone down to the parking attendants. Frances Crockett, who's won national recognition for her work as the O's general manager, recalls hearing her father say many times, never lose touch with the people. Be on the same foot with them. Never drive a Cadillac because those people paid for it. Jim Jr. oversees the entire Crockett promotional firm and the wrestling, which is spread to cities and hamlets from Canada to Georgia and occasionally to foreign countries, with both live shows and on television. David and Jackie are in charge of television production, which churns out wrestling shows and a variety of other products like training films, commercials, halftime specials for ball games, and promos for racetracks. The article just continues, but man, you want to talk about a big time deal. And I realize a lot of our listeners here don't recognize the importance of the local newspaper. But in this era, the newspaper was how most people got their news. Eventually it became the network news and the local news. And now, of course, we've got cable news on 24/7. But once upon a time, the folks who were really the movers and shakers and influencers, they were the people who owned the paper. And when you get the attention of the paper, this is a big doggone deal. And this isn't just a thing talking about, hey, tonight, come see Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Maybe you guys had a bunch of ads like that. I'm sure you did. I've seen them all over. But when they go out of their way to say, we want to write a story about your family, this is a big deal. It's a big honor for you and your family, is it not?
It is. It is. Because they don't have to do it.
No.
You know, that's it. They can, during that time period when newspapers were king.
Yes.
They could make you or break you, even more so than television, because as you said, anybody that's anybody is going to read the paper. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the local paper.
Right.
Yeah. You might get the Washington Post or the Times, the Wall Street Journal, but you're going to get the local paper and you're going to digest it and look at those articles. But you know, yes. And that was very flattering.
Of course.
Ron Green, was, I remember Ron, matter of fact, I think, what time he was sports director, his main gig was, I know that he did reports from Augusta every April, for the Masters. And so, yeah, was a nice man. Very nice. His son, I think, also works for the Observer now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
I like a family writing about a family, and there was a lot to write about on Monday, the 29th of April. I mean, I've said this a few times on this show, but it feels like once you guys got TV, you want to talk about expanding? How about not one, not two, not three, but 4 shows on the same doggone day? We're out of paper. Lawrenceville, Georgia is going to see Buzz Sawyer versus Barbarian on top for $2,500. Greenville, South Carolina gets $75.15 for Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard in a Texas bull rope match for the TV title. Fayetteville, North Carolina gets $6,001 in a Texas death match for Jimmy Valiant and superstar Billy Graham. But you're up in Vince's backyard for Pistol Pez Watley, by God, taking on Crusher Khrushchev for $5,700. 4 shows in a single day. Man, how in the world did you keep up with all this? This had to be crazy. This is, just to add context to this.
This is crazy. I mean, it's like taking and throwing the wrestling talent up against the wall and see what sticks. You know,
you're doing it before email, before the internet, before apps, before cell phones, before pagers. Like, we just had to, well, I hope it works out. I mean, this is crazy to think running 4 shows. I can't imagine with all that technology on my side, running 2 shows in a single day. You guys are doing 4. That's insane.
And 4, and 2 of them, 2 of them, we have no idea how they're going to do because we're not booking, our booker's not handling the book.
Right.
There, we're just sending talent.
Right.
So it makes you want to take a drink.
Well, you're going to have a drink when the month is over because you got 2 more shows to close it out. Tuesday, April 30th. You'll do a TV taping in Salisbury, North Carolina. Show A and Show B. See the tape numbers there. $4,700, at least locally. We advertised probably on the radio and posters and whatnot.
Right.
Magnum TA and Buddy Landell. And then, of course, all your top stars versus enhancement talent. But the big gate is not that one, which wasn't bad at $4,700. It's in Philadelphia. Everybody wanted to see Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard. So far, we've seen bar matches. We've seen Texas Death. We've seen Lumberjack. We've seen all the iterations. But now we get a cage match, which even if we all know that a bar match is technically, quote unquote, more dangerous, a cage match was always the way historically you blew off a big feud. And I'm not saying we're blowing it off, but Philadelphia was certainly excited to see this cage match for the TV title. $18,800. That's big time money here in 1985.
It is, but I'm just going to say, look at our television. In Salisbury. All right. Look, the dark match was Magnum and Landell.
That's right.
Valiant against Graham. But then the others within the tapings themselves, there are no angles. We're
doing matches,
pure matches.
I'll run through it here. It's Buddy Landell over Rocky King, Magnum TA over Ben Alexander, Ivan Koloff over Ron Rossi, Ron Bass over Gene Ligon, Superstar Billy Graham and the Barbarian over Joel Deaton and Mark Fleming, Magnum TA over Doug Vines, the Barbarian over Gene Ligon, Ron Bass over Rocky King, Don Kernoodle over Ben Alexander, Ivan and Nikita Koloff over Mark Fleming and Ron Rossi. And then, of course, we got the videotape clips of Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard. But you didn't have a ton of stars here. But still, that's on your TV. But the house show, the folks in Philadelphia, woo.
Got a great show. Oh, yes. Yeah, this is the match they want to see.
Yes.
That no one else could do it better.
Yes.
If you think about it, no one, except Dusty and Tully. They couldn't. Tully Blanchard, he is a ringmaster. The way he thinks and moves and dictates the pace of the match, letting Dusty do his things, knowing when he needs, let's say, to rest. I love watching it, the psychology of it, and just see how they do it. Really, it's yeah. You have to back away from being a fan and just look and say, "This is amazing."
It
Here are
is.
these two guys that are ad-libbing the whole time. That it's just okay, and listening to the audience, and we're going to take them and do this, and instead of what you see now. And Tony Khan, I'm sorry, but your your TV shows is one big hot spot. They just keep flying and flying and flying. And everybody does finishing moves and stuff. Instead of they're not telling a story.
I was going to say, you wish they would slow down and tell a story more than what they're doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about something that's written in the Observer. And this is in the Observer that's published on May 4th. But of course, that's the one that people got on a Monday, which meant he wrote it the Wednesday prior. So technically this counts for April, and we'll close with this.
All right.
Dave would write, lots of fishy stuff going on here. I have a report of Crockett setting up to promote in opposition to the NWA in at least one city, and they're threatening to go into Chicago as well. That's AWA territory. Flair and several others have been signed to contracts by Crockett, so it looks as if he's going to use WTBS to go at it on its own. WTBS has been really boring thus far. Jim Crockett's arrival at the Olympic, which is the auditorium in Los Angeles, will be June 27th with Flair versus Slaughter. Crockett does have television, which is channel 56, which he got by bumping Vince. But instead of plugging his own upcoming show, it shows interviews promoting 3-week-old matches between Tommy Rich and Rip Rogers in small Georgia towns. Now, I bring this up because as you and I are talking, over my head is what fans know to be the big gold belt. And I'm sure you recall that on the back of that big gold belt, there's Nelson Royal's information where he ordered it for the Western store and all of that. And we would see that belt debut on Valentine's Day, 1986. And the original sketch art that's been released in Dick Boyne's fabulous book called The Big Gold, you can see the original concept art where at the top of the belt, it says NWA. Now, of course, we also see a note where that's scratched out. It's not called the NWA. In fact, this belt behind my head has absolutely no letters, no federation affiliation, if you will. It just says World's Heavyweight Wrestling Champion. And that lends me to think, hey, they were thinking about leaving the NWA and doing their own thing. And Meltzer wrote here, this is in May of 85, several months before we see the debut of the Big Gold, that you guys had signed Flair to contracts and you're actually running opposite the NWA. When did you and your brother decide, maybe we don't need the NWA? We've got national television, and I understand the history and the prestige and the recognition and all of that of the NWA, certainly the legacy of the NWA, but you did make a belt and you did scratch the letters off, and
yes, you did.
And your family is actually coming out of pocket and getting a loan to put this on television. So I get, why in the world would we build equity for something we don't own?
Yeah. How do you like my belt? I did that belt.
Did you really? The big gold belt
Yes,
was you doing?
Yeah.
Talk to me about that. We've never talked about that.
I kept on looking at, Nelson Royal, because I went to him because I said, Nelson, all these rodeo guys with these big belt buckles, that I see, they're so gorgeous, that I'd like a championship, the World Heavyweight Championship belt, with the gold and silver and jewels. And so started, and, it became, it went through quite a few redesigns. During that time, we always wanted to be part of the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, but those guys became a pain in the ass. all they wanted to suck out of us and not help us in any way. And finally, it's like, stick it up your ass, guys. It's, we tried to help everybody in Florida, and, it just, Kansas City. And it just goes on and on and on. Give us this, give us that. And, put our guys on your TV, put our promos in your television shows. And we got nothing.
Well,
nothing.
I'm glad you said that, because I wanted to point out that the NWA, in case you're not familiar, was not like its own real entity. There wasn't like an NWA. We could say it's a governing body, but it's not its own individual business. It's a group of other promoters trying to work together. But at this point, there's only one of these promotions that has national television. And that promotion also happens to have the world champion, Ric Flair. So if you've got the world champion and you've come out of pocket for at least $1 million for the right to have national television, and you're loaning talent out all over the country to these other promotions, and they're asking you promote our stuff on your national television, and no one's sending a check, I could totally see why you and your brother say to yourself, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
I've got my own TV. I've got the champion. Well, and you probably think to yourself, okay, well, what if they want the belt back? Ding. What if we just made a new belt? Is that pretty much
where it came from. Yeah. We decided that we're going to retire it.
Yep.
And have especially when you've got Rick.
Right.
As the
and Dusty Rhodes. Champion. Dusty Rhodes is your booker. Ric Flair's your top guy. What else do you need? Like, if you've got national television, you've got a beautiful world championship you could design. You've got Dusty Rhodes booking. You got Ric Flair as your top heel. Dusty maybe as your top baby face. You kind of check all the boxes. You don't necessarily need the NWA, right?
Right. And look at the rest of it. We have Tully, we have Iron, we have Ole. It just goes, Magnum TA. It just goes on and on and on. We've got the talent.
Right.
Guys, we've got the talent. We want to work with you, but you don't want to work with us. You definitely don't want to give us anything. And so it finally comes to the point that screw you. It's just, it got to that point that, that they wanted everything. And it just wouldn't quit. Just wouldn't quit.
From a business perspective, do you start thinking that way? And again, we're probably talking a little personal here, but you've told us before here on the program that when you guys got that TBS thing, you had to go to the bank and you had to not only do loan documents, but you had to sign on as personal guarantors, meaning you put up your own personal house that you and your wife live in. And if this doesn't go well, not only do you lose the time slot and maybe lose the promotion, but you lose the house that takes care of your wife and son and family and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm sure you would have to think, wait a minute, why am I taking care of all these other promoters and answering their favors and doing their bidding and getting their stars on our TV when they're not willing to do the same for us? You know what? Just in case, we're going to start making some plans outside of them. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it is. It is fair to say that you run parallel lines. Okay, we're going to do this, but I've got this ready just in case. And so here we go. So at any time I can pull this one and boom, we're going.
Well,
and
that's a good businessman, Mr. Crockett. I mean, you had a plan A, you had a plan B, you were ready. And we know that you guys are poised for a big 85 and a huge 86. And we covered all of April as in-depth as we possibly could. You're back on TBS. We covered how you got it last month in March of 85. Of course, that's the month when WrestleMania happens. All of a sudden, there's more interest than ever before in professional wrestling on the heels of WrestleMania. It's being shown on ABC affiliates in its entirety here in America. And in addition to that, your own home paper, it's a hero's welcome. And whenever you sort of put your toe in the water in Ohio or Pennsylvania or Florida or Georgia, wherever, it's working. I can see where you guys are starting to get in some momentum just 30 days after this acquisition. And I can't wait for us to talk about May of 85 next month. This is going to be fun.
It'll be fun. It'll be a great time. We'll have a good time. We will.
Mr. Crockett, I can't thank you enough for the time. I just love talking about the history of professional wrestling and Jim Crockett Promotions. It's my all-time favorite promotion. As a kid, I didn't even know it existed. I became a wrestling fan in 1988. But now that I've grown up and gotten a little older and started to appreciate the history of pro wrestling, I just can't believe what you guys created. And I love that we get to celebrate it every week here on Ad Free Shows. And I love that you have as much fun doing it as I do. So thank you so much for all the time.
I am. I appreciate this really you think that people don't think about it or appreciate it, but I am learning, from you and the fans out there that I am so happy. I really am.
It meant so much to us.
Thank you, Conrad. Thank you.
No, thank you, Mr. Crockett. It meant so much to us. And I know we're having a little mutual admiration society here right now, but I just can't believe I get to talk to you about this stuff every month.
You want to kiss my butt?
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't know you made that belt. That's cool as hell, man. And I can't wait to learn some more stuff next month right here on Ad Free Shows. Hope you guys have had a great time. Hope you're digging what we're doing. Hope you'll come see us in person. Every time we have some sort of a big get together, we find a way to get Mr. Crockett there. Cause if nothing else,
oh yes.
I just want to hang out with him and hear the old stories of the way things wrestling used to be. And I just can't.
I'm going to interrupt you. I know you're trying to cut me off, but I want to. You do these phone conference calls or something with some fans?
Yeah.
All right. When I was in Chicago with you, there was a group of fans there, and they said, "David, you need to get on there with us sometime."
We'll do it,
and I'd be more than happy to.
Well, let's line it up. How about that, boys and girls? Right here in April. Bank on it. You're going to see David Crockett answering your questions live. Can't thank you enough, Mr. Crockett. Such a blast. Appreciate all the time. And we'll see all of you next week right here on Ad Free Shows.